I'm Scott Allen Miller. This is my life living in Leon, Nicaragua, and as many times, we're here to talk about electricity today. But before you run away and say, look, I know Nicaragua has pretty solid electricity. I know to get a battery, Scott, what more is there to possibly know? We're going to be talking about the cost of electricity and most importantly, why you simply cannot predict it. No matter what anyone tries to tell you, you can't predict the cost of electricity in Nicaragua. I know what you're going to say. I've checked everywhere and the kilowatt hour pricing is pretty stable and it's everywhere. Everyone has the same information within a very small variance. It must be mostly accurate. And you would be correct if that was a meaningful number in any way. But it's not. That's the trick. Like so many things, when we're getting tricked from information online, it's because we're given true information out of context. So we're going to talk about that context and how you can apply this to real life and something you need to know about living in Nicaragua right after that bump. For expats looking to live on a budget in Nicaragua, we're often faced with trying to come up with exactly what things are going to cost every month so that we can plan around them. That's a great idea, and I wish that we could do that a bit better than we can. Electricity is quite often here a very tiny ticket item, one that we generally forget about. My last apartment that I had for years had an average monthly cost of about $11. Luke has a one-bedroom apartment up in Matagalpa, and he is often in that $10 to $12 range depending on his usage. These are real-world numbers that people often pay, but there's a lot of things that go into what it costs for electricity here and what you can expect, or more importantly, what you can't expect. So there's a few things to start off with. One, there is posted per kilowatt hour pricing, but it does not apply equally to all people. Depending on your usage and your location, it is different. Every town, every barrio has slightly different pricing, or potentially slightly different pricing. And as you use electricity, it's often tiered so that if you use a very small amount, it's essentially free. As you use a little bit more, you pay a moderate amount. And as you use a lot, the tier that you're at jumps, and the amount that you pay per kilowatt hour is supposed to go way up. And sometimes it works that way, but not always. There are plenty of places and situations where you may end up on a flat rate. For example, much of the country does not currently have power meters. So if we don't have power meters, how do you pay per kilowatt hour? It's not that they don't want power meters, it's that there's a limited supply in the country and the number of people who need them outpaces the rate at which they're able to import them. So it's actually a shortage. And this has been going on for years and they're regularly rolling them out. But as they break or they die or they age out or whatever, or as there's growth and they need more of them, there just aren't enough to keep up with the demand. And that means that many people end up going without functional power meters, or in some cases with no power meter at all. So obviously, if we are living in a place that does not completely use power meters, using per kilowatt hour as a strict guide to pricing can't possibly be accurate. That is not how everyone's power is calculated. There are certainly people, especially in the big cities, where you're more likely to have a more predictable situation, but every single home is potentially different. You never know when you're going to find a place that your neighbors are getting, predictable power. They're measuring off of a normal meter. You may not, or you may be on a meter that's set differently. We've had this happen where they hooked up the meter incorrectly and it was billing it 2 or 3 times the rate. You're just spinning out of control. Everything shut off. It's going out of control. Or you could be having power siphoned off somewhere, but that's a slightly different problem. But so you have this, even when everything is completely working perfectly, it's still a little bit unpredictable based on this tiering mechanism and location calculation, right? So you're starting from a slightly difficult number, but if you're used to it and you're doing it for a while, you can figure out what your price can be, and you can talk to neighbors and say, well, they use air conditioning about the same as me, they have a computer the same as me, their house is the same size as mine, it's in the same neighborhood, our prices should be comparable, and that's probably true. But everywhere you go, you end up in different situations, and we don't always know what it is that's causing the power to be so wildly different. Even at my apartment where we were paying $10 to $11 per month, we couldn't tell months where we did and didn't use air conditioning really changed the bill, maybe the more than 50 cents, right? Tiny amounts. So we're unclear what was driving the cost. And we had TVs and computers and internet access, dual air conditioners. They would run them heavily to air condition the entire apartment, 2-bedroom, 1-bath, small apartment, but still that's a lot of air conditioning, way more than Luke could be using in his 1-bedroom. up in a cool location. We're down here in Leon where air conditioning needs to run hard to keep things cool at all, and still we're seeing those really low prices. Here at my estate, we've seen prices vary between 80 was the lowest, and we paid 80 something for years. We never had any issues with the meter. We moved in, that was our price from the beginning, right? The power company hooked us up and was charging us 80 for a really long time. It varied depending on our usage, but not very much. Very similar to the apartment. $80 to $90 per month. If we accidentally left everything running and forgot about it, we might hit 100. But on normal months, we never really got below 80, but we never really got above 90, except for once or twice, and we realized that we needed to cut back a little bit. But then suddenly one day it jumped to 800 to 1,000 every month and can vary by massive amounts. It's absolutely crazy. We didn't change our usage at all. Since it jumped, we've cut our usage significantly. We probably use at most 2/3 the power that we did back when we were only paying 80, and now we're paying quite literally 10 to 11 times what we used to pay. No change of behavior on our side, no interaction between us and the power company. Just one day they decided to change how they measured our house, and everything changed. Then we asked them to come look at it. They broke the power meter, and now it's locked in at a flat rate. There's nothing we can do. If we turn off all the power and don't even live here, we'll still be billed at that rate. So nothing we do can alter it. So once again, your kilowatt per hour cannot be used as a measure reliably. And nearly maybe 1 out of 3 people that you talk to are in some kind of situation like this. Not normally being billed a huge amount. Ours is definitely extremely high. We can't figure out what to do, and that's going to bring us to our next what to do scenario. But in this situation, you can see that a very high number of people are at some kind of flat rate or averaged rate or community calculated rate because they don't have meters everywhere. And so they're trying to do something to guess what your power should be or calculate it in some way based off of something other than measured kilowatt hours. And so it's very important. I've had some people in the past get very belligerent that they're like, you're lying. That's like America does this, so everyone does this, right? And in the US, if you don't have measured kilowatt hours, they just cut off your power, right? But they don't offer something else. It's always measured. I've never heard of someone getting something that wasn't measured in the United States, or unless they're in some very specific, Section 8 situation and the government is covering it and it's given at a flat rate. But the underlying power is always being measured. But here that is not the case, and bringing that this is how America would do it mentality is going to be just incorrect, right? So I've had people try to promote because they can find published numbers and they say, show me your bill. And then they look at the kilowatt hours and they ignore the fact that the bill isn't reflective of kilowatt hours that actually happened. And so because it's written on bills, some people will try to claim that they have this information. So look out for scam websites that are publishing per kilowatt hours as a price for the country out of context, because it's demonstrably false. It is not how we actually reliably measure the power. It can be, when measured, it would be in this manner, but because it's not measured, you can't say that's what the kilowatt hours is. Clearly, some places are far lower, some places are far higher, and what do you do about it? Because you can, in some cases, call the power company, right? And that's what we've done. We've asked the power company to come out and measure, asked them to come out and replace our meter, but they don't have any meters. So we're locked into this. What they did, we think, is they accidentally put on an incorrect meter, set it incorrectly, and then measured super high. And then the meter broke because it was installed incorrectly, and they can't get us a replacement meter. So we're locked into this nearly $1,000 per month power cost, regardless of our usage, until such time as they're able to find a meter. But of course, they're under no real incentive to find a meter because they're making all this money. And what can we do about it, right? Really nothing. So we're trapped. The only choice we have, and you're not going to like this, but is to move. And this is something that living in Nicaragua as a renter is something you're often going to consider. So we say this a bit, but I think we tend to say it and people gloss over it as kind of a thing to ignore. But what we say is, when you find, now if you're incredibly wealthy and you don't care about the price, you don't care, right? You just want to be in the place you want to be in. But for most of us who are budget conscious, or people who are just trying to be responsible about their spending, when you find a place whose power is well managed, whether it's a flat rate and it's low, or it's a measured rate and it's inappropriate, and you say, this is a good situation, either I don't care about the power and I'm totally happy with it, or the power is so cheap I'm never going to move. And that's what we did. We got an apartment that had a great price. We'd never give up the apartment, right? Why would you give it up? It's so inexpensive because your electric is so cheap. So we kept that apartment based on how good the electric was. So you tend to hold on to places if your electric is really good. If your electric is average, you may roll the dice. If you end up in a situation where your electric is super high, typically what you do is move, because the person who's moving in fresh may get a fresh start. They may be able to demand a meter, they may be able to do different things, and they'll say, well, we've never measured your electric before, so we can't justify charging you off of someone else's measurement or mismeasurement in our case. Like, we know we're not using that much. We should be probably paying somewhere around $150 per month. That would be reasonable. We're very conscientious about all of our power usage. All of our computers and stuff are very low power consumption. We turn things off at night. We only run air conditioning when we need to. We're outdoors all the time. The house is wide open. We only air condition tiny rooms. The house is more insulated than the average house. We've put in insulation into the house all over the place. We've put in high efficiency air conditioning everywhere. So we should not be getting charged very much. The 80 does feel low, but not completely out of scope when you compare other people with air conditioning. So that may have been an accurate number. If not, it's no more than 150 if you were measuring. So because we're paying so much, if they can't get out and fix it relatively soon, it heavily incentivizes us to leave. And that's just a reality you need to have here, is that some things, if flexibility is key. If you're set in your ways and absolutely refuse to be flexible when things happen, you're going to end up having a much tougher time. Nicaragua rewards flexibility pretty heavily. So it's a relatively common thing, if you're a renter, to stay places where electric is low and move on when electric is high, and simply keep rolling those dice, and eventually people end up in good situations. And some places just struggle with getting renters because their electric is so high. And that's all through direct payment. Now, if you're paying, your landlord for electric, all bets are off. All kinds of wild things can happen, so be cautious there. Now, what if you're going to own a house? Obviously, this is a little bit scary for owning a house, and that's absolutely true. If you're going to own a house, you need to be prepared for some amount of fighting with the power company, some amount of going to the police or to the government and saying, hey, I'm not getting billed correctly. This is not fair. And I'm trapped, right? I'm being treated as a prisoner, having to pay electric. I'm just going to shut off my electricity and move, right? But you need to be willing to disconnect. Basically, that kind of needs to be the threat. Now, I've never had to do this. When you own, you have a bit more power. It's difficult for us because we're renters and the owner isn't here. So we as renters are arguing with the power company, not the owner. The owner would definitely have more clout and be able to do a little bit more. As far as the power company is concerned, well, your renters don't like it, they can leave, and they go to the owner. They're like, how much are you using air conditioning, right? And she's like, I don't know, I'm not the one in the house. And they're like, well, then we can't help you, right? Whatever. It's a little bit more complicated. So renters need to be flexible. As an owner, you do need to be prepared. What if you have to fight this? Make sure you have a good lawyer. Make sure you have maybe your ability to measure it yourself. Maybe in an extreme case, be ready to cut it off and go to solar completely and be like, I'm off grid, right? I'm not on the power grid, so I'm not billable. You need to have some amount of flexibility, and that's something that, as we say in the business side of Nicaragua, right? If Nicaragua was super easy, we'd have tons of competition. The advantage that people who have been here for a long time and work really hard at learning the system, yes, there is an overhead to certain activities in Nicaragua, but getting through that overhead rewards you on the personal side with lower cost of living and a beautiful, safe environment, and on the professional side or on the business side with access to a market that's somewhat inaccessible to the outside world. Yeah, it's completely open legally. Anyone can come invest. Anyone can come open a business at any time. Anyone can move. Like, it's so easy. But to really be competitive, to understand how to maneuver through the alcaldías, through the legal system, through the filing, through DHE, through INS, and all those different things, takes a lot of work. You can't do it casually. And so we find a lot of businesses that fail or give up is because they either didn't calculate what it took to get through those barriers and weren't prepared for it, or they found out how hard it is and gave up as not being worth it. And that's true anywhere, but the amount that happens here is much higher. Those of us who fought through it have a big advantage, that the playing field is a little bit more empty, but you have to be willing and able to invest that time and effort to figure it out. It's not necessarily a monetary investment. It is a time and knowledge and experience investment. And in the personal side, it's much more of a flexibility investment, being willing to play the game, to not get super frustrated by little things like this. And yeah, it can be really frustrating. What do you mean my power? We've loved this place. We've been here for years, but would we consider moving based on this power situation? Absolutely. That discussion is a very real one now. And so, this municipality who's getting all this money from us may lose a renter completely, and this house can go back to being empty as it was for a really long time, because having $1,000 on top of your rent is a crippling number and certainly makes you need to reevaluate. And that's an extreme case, right? But it's a personal one that's happening right now. And so this came up today. that Lance was asking in the group, what should I expect to pay in San Juan del Sur? And the same situation is true. Here's what the kilowatt hours probably are. Here's how they probably measure. But if you end up in a place that's on some kind of flat rate, it could be really cheap or really expensive, and the number that you see is somewhere in the middle. So you may end up with a windfall because it's way better than you thought, or it could be way worse. And importantly, it may start off one way and change to something else down the road, just like it has with us. We've been in every one of these situations: expensive, cheap, and measured in the middle, and it just varies a lot. We've had measured low and measured high, where the amount that they're charging per kilowatt hour is all over the map as well. So there's so much unpredictability in every possible way, right? Over time, where you are, and individual housing. So you put it all together and then add in your own personal use if it's being measured. It's a wild scenario. So the best advice I can give you is be prepared to find out after the fact, be prepared for it to change, and be prepared to be flexible. Don't put yourself in a situation where you're stuck and have no choice but to pay those power bills. And the more flexible you are, the more protected you are, the less likely it is to go wrong. So thanks for joining me. Thanks for the question. Like and subscribe. If you'd like to help support the channel, you can buy me a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/Scott L. Miller. Helps to pay for my electric, but no amount of the channel covers my electric bills alone, let alone anything else. So I really appreciate all the help that I can get. As always, get in those comments, say hello, ask a question down there. You can get in the show notes, in the individual episode notes, and you get all of our contact information, how to support my producer with her Hodgkin's lymphoma fight, how to send in videos of yourself, and all kinds of stuff. Don't forget, on Thursdays, we do a live stream in the afternoons. It is a lot of fun, really good time to connect with people, but we will not be doing one on American Thanksgiving, not because it's Thanksgiving, because it's my daughter's birthday. So we're going to be celebrating that at home, and I will not be doing a live stream that day. And always remember to give a thumbs up, and remember to comment on Thursdays on the live stream. My youngest daughter, Luciana, does those thumbnails, and we're very proud of the work that she does. And she has now been hired by another show that is not us, and is actually being paid to do thumbnails for them based on the work that she did here. So that's very exciting for her. Thanks for joining me. I will see all of you tomorrow.